Back on MorningLine, final segment, talking about the impeachment trial in the U.S. Senate that begins today for former President Trump. Your thoughts, if you'd like to share with us on where it goes and what you think of it. With us this morning is Professor John Weil from over at MTSU. And yeah, I think, again, when it comes to this trial, and as it is with a lot of things political and this former president, that, again, the country in large measure, is kind of split on whether or not this should go forward or not. I guess that's no surprise. If you're on the Democratic side of things, and they, of course, now control the Senate and just barely, and the House, do you think they know that it's highly unlikely, unless they come up with some incredible bombshells during this trial, that there will be 17 Republicans to vote with him to convict? So in their mind is, we may not be able to convict, but we're doing this so we can lay out very clearly once and for all to the American public as a whole what we believe this president, former president, did with regard to that January 6th insurrection. This is our chance just to lay it all out really clear. And then, yeah, it's over, we move on, but at least we laid it out. Is that their thinking, perhaps?
My colleagues, Dr. Federici in the Political Science Department, pointed out to me that in all three prior presidential impeachments, there has only been one senator who crossed party lines. And now this is in the Senate. And that, of course, was Mitt Romney in the last one. And I do think it would be significant, the vote was 55-45, saying that they thought it was legal to go ahead and have the trial. And that suggests that there are at least 5 Republicans who may be in play. And depending on how the evidence comes out, there's always a chance that a couple others, and that in and of itself would be historically significant. I mean, it wouldn't simply be, the impeachment hasn't been purely partisan, and it doesn't look like the trial will be purely partisan either. And again, what I would want my senators to know, our senators to know, is that their primary obligation is not to a man, it's not to a party, it's to the U.S. Constitution. They have the same obligation to protect and defend as the president himself does.
Well, and unfortunately, with most of our lawmakers there, it seems so often that their primary obligation is self-preservation. And I think the big concern for many of these Republicans, some of whom may have some serious doubts about the situation involving the former president, don't you think it's that former President Trump still does have, a strong core of support, and they fear their home district, if they vote a certain way, that those who still support President Trump will hurt him? Whereas if for some reason this former president's approval ratings, Professor, right now were in the low teens or single digits, and really he had no political capital left, then I truly think he would be convicted in the Senate, because these senators are going to say, wait, no one likes him anymore. We're going to vote against him whether we believe it or not. Is that what it comes down to, maybe?
I think so. And, a good parallel here, what that fact left out, the fact that only one senator has crossed lines, is that it seems fairly apparent that had Nixon refused to resign, there were actually a group of leading Republicans who went to the White House and he said, what should I do? And they, what would happen if it got to the Senate? And they said, even we couldn't vote for you. So
right.
If Trump were as unpopular as Richard Nixon were, we really wouldn't be arguing about this at all.
Right. Okay. Point taken. Let's go next to Jerry. Jerry, good morning. Hi, Jerry.
Hello.
Hey, Jerry, go ahead, buddy.
Hey, all this rigmarole and all this junk going around about the Trump and all that, the biggest problem I see is Nancy Pelosi. They need just to get rid of her, and all this junk will go away. Trying to impeach Donald Trump, which he's not even in office. They're spending all this money, and I think it ought to come out of their pocket instead of the people's pocket. They think twice before they go along with this anymore. And another thing, Nick, if they'd let you loose with your pad and pencil go around and check on everybody like we used to, the world would be a whole lot better. Especially if they hired another guy like you.
Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. You know, a lot of people point to Pelosi, Professor, and now she supervised and was over the impeachment in the House. Is it fair to hold her responsible for what's happening in the Senate? Of course, it wouldn't have gotten to the Senate without the House vote. But I mean, isn't this more now Chuck Schumer and others, or isn't it all Democrats and a small group of Republicans as a whole?
You know, it seems like both sides have to have a devil. And on Trump's, you know, on the Democratic side, Trump is sort of the current devil. On the Republican side, it's Pelosi. You know, 4 years ago, it was Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
It bothers me a little bit that in both cases they're women who maybe seem a little bit more politically vulnerable than men. I'm not sure. But, you know, if you're worried about wasting money, we had a president who from November the 3rd through January 20th spent most of his time either on the golf course or disputing an election. And this is during the time when tens of thousands of people are dying of COVID. So if you're worried about wasting money, it's already been wasted. You know, apply it to both sides. At least when you're having a trial of impeachment, you're doing something the Constitution actually authorizes and perhaps even requires that you do.
Yeah, again, it's rose-colored glasses on either side as you look through it. To Jerry and others, they only see one side of it, and you're absolutely right. The spending of the money, yeah, you could make the argument that all of this exercise that starts today is a waste of time and that we should just get to the business at hand of this country, and there could be a strong argument on that side. But the other part of it, I recall when we had that horrible Christmas morning bombing in downtown Nashville. I mean, we didn't hear anything from the president. I don't know if he ever commented on it, but for several days. And meanwhile, we have COVID-19. He was so focused on just the election and on the golf course and not the matters of state. At that point, you can argue as a president who was a lame duck, but it was like he gave up. So, I mean, again, it's rose-colored glasses on each side. This guy can do no wrong. She can do no wrong. If you think either of those are true, you're wrong. I mean, it's just politics. It's insane these days how people have blinders on and will not acknowledge the shortcomings of either side. And that's the big problem. You know, I mean, there's been some controversy. I don't know if you watched the Super Bowl, Professor, but one of the more controversial or talked about commercials was the Bruce Springsteen one, where, of course, he is known for never taking, you know, ad dollars to go on and, you know, push some product. But he did in this case for Jeep. And the commercial was well done. Some people are upset that Bruce Springsteen took money for a commercial, but he talked about, you know, trying to get to the center again. And man, we're so polarized. I hear what he's saying, but, you know, I don't see, you know, Joe getting together with Jerry anytime soon from our callers this morning.
Well, it certainly helps that Trump has been banned, at least for a while, from tweeting. That has lowered the temperature considerably. And, you know, whatever you think of Joe Biden, to this point at least, you know, he hasn't jumped in there on this impeachment thing. He's made a comment or two, but he's pretty much stayed to the sidelines. Most of what he has said so far has been conciliatory. And it's my hope that that will at least in part lower the temperature.
One thing I was not aware of as we wrap things up, it's a little unrelated to this, but it has to do with, of course, Norah O'Donnell had the exclusive interview with him for the Super Bowl. And one of the things that came out of that was that he is now choosing not to include the former president in any of the national security briefings. And I did not realize that after presidents leave, oftentimes the new president allows them to remain in the loop. And I'm not sure why that's the case anyway, but I know that in this case the president said, no, I'm not going to do this. I don't know if President Trump allowed former President Obama to remain in the loop. Did that come out and vice versa? Is it a standard thing?
I think that Biden moved back just a little bit. I think he said he would leave it up to those who are giving the briefings to decide. The one issue that's a little tricky in Trump's case is we still don't know the extent of his foreign holdings and business investments. And there is always the possibility that he might use national security hearings as a way of, getting inside information that could help him with his business.
But here's my question beyond that. We just have a couple minutes real quick. I mean, why any former president is included in that? They're out, they're gone, they have no power, they have no decision making. Why? And I'm not just talking about President Trump, I'm talking about any former president. Why would they be allowed to remain in the loop after they're gone?
I think the answer is that presidents often call upon former presidents for diplomatic kind of, they'll send them sometimes to state funerals, or, Jimmy Carter, I know, has gone abroad to oversee elections. Others have gone abroad to sort of, negotiate tricky things. And I think it's very helpful if we have a group of wise men, and maybe hopefully someday some women in there as well. But, individuals other than the president who's at least familiar with the general direction of our policy.
I mean, with you saying that, I'm just curious, does that mean then that all former presidents, as they make their way through, be it, Clinton and Bush and Obama, they still are they still receiving security briefings?
Understanding.
And that's a reasonable explanation that they all are to some degree, but it sounds like maybe in this case, maybe he stepped it back, but it sounds like this president doesn't like the idea of, former President Trump getting that briefing. I guess we won't know.
Not to rehash it too much, but if you go back to the first impeachment, there's a strong suggestion there that Trump was sort of using his muscle on foreign leaders, and if there's a chance that he did that as president, there's always a chance that he would also do it as a businessman.
Gotcha. Professor, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an education, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good.
Thank you, my friend. We'll take a break. When we come back, programming note about tomorrow right after this.